Clapping before the intro. Love podcast, hate nonsense. It's the PoliticsJOE podcast. Clap again. That's humiliating. I'm Head Campbell here with...
You're Head Campbell?
I'm Head Campbell here with Heva Santina.
Yeah?
Remember when who was at the live stream called you the wrong name? And it was very funny.
What did they call me?
Amy or something? on election night. Someone was like, so Amy. It was quite rude.
Do you think I could be an Amy?
Yeah.
That's the rudest thing you've ever
no,
said.
Amy's are nice.
Yeah, all right.
They're not Abigail's.
Abigail. What's the worst girl's name?
Ava.
Good one.
What is the worst girl's name?
Edwina.
Yeah, I think that's a bad name.
I actually like that name.
Do you?
Yeah.
Would you name your child Edwina?
I think maybe Veronica. I would really like that name.
Veronica?
Yeah, I love Veronica. I had my nonna's sister was Vera. Well, one of her 18 was Vera. I like short for Veronica. I like that too.
They're quite old women names.
Well, she probably was quite old, wasn't she?
Yes, true, but she's not always been old. That's how aging works.
No, baby Vera. It'd be lovely. I really like me.
Smokes 20 a day.
Well, it would have to because I smoked throughout the pregnancy.
Your baby comes out addicted to nicotine.
I don't know if this is funny.
Or it's going to happen anyway, so you might as well.
We might have some like American Puritans or some Protestants listening.
Why would Protestants be angry about
They're
that?
always angry about something, aren't they?
Yeah. I suppose that was the point of the Reformation.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Reformation, Keir Starmer's in Germany.
Could you just talk me through that?
It started in Germany.
Oh, right. Sorry. Sorry, I didn't know where you were going.
No, you don't know anything about Protestantism.
Well, I wouldn't need to, would I?
Because it's for heathens.
Yeah, and I won't make any jokes back to you because I know how uncomfortable it makes you.
What about... I'm also not Protestant, famously.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, before we get there, I should look to the rundown that Laura so handsomely prepared. So handsomely. Handsome Laura.
Yeah? What does handsome Laura's rundown say?
I always think it's quite funny when women are described as handsome.
Yeah? Why do you think that's funny? You don't want to give them a compliment?
Because it sounds like I suppose it is a compliment, but it sounds like you're just calling them manly at the same time.
Well, gender is a construct, Ed.
Yeah, famously. But I reject that. I don't believe that at all.
Okay. You want your women to be women?
I want my women to be gorgeous and my men to be handsome. Can't be old-fashioned.
That is the two genders, isn't it?
Handsome and gorgeous.
Yeah. Okay, good. Now that we've got your transphobia out of the way.
How is that transphobic? If you identify as gorgeous, you're gorgeous. That's my take.
Thank you.
Speaking of gorgeous, Ollie was on Newsnight last night. And
Yeah.
everyone on the panel gorgeous.
Which is why he couldn't be here today.
Yeah, it's too big time.
He went out with the Newsnight cast. Didn't show up to work today until midday.
Him and Victoria Derbyshire have been on one.
Yeah, him and Simon Clark.
They really hit it off.
They did hit it off,
Big
actually.
buddies.
Yeah. I think it's their economic policy. That's what they got on with.
He did make the exact same point he made on here.
Did you see that his eyes lit up when he realised that Victoria was teeing up a question that meant he could actually drop the analysis he gave yesterday?
Yeah.
Should we hear it?
Oh, they've heard it already.
Have they?
Well, they heard it yesterday.
Oh, okay.
I think we should.
Well, so you're not going to hear it, but we could have put it in there.
We could have, but you'd have to scrub through yesterday's episode and last night's episode of Newsnight.
We could just put the Newsnight clip here.
Okay, should we do that?
I think it was underwhelming, unimpressive, dishonest.
Get off the fence, Ollie, why don't you?
I think if you're going to stand on a platform of change, it's basically the only word you heard from his lips over the course of the general election campaign, and as Nick said, then stand on essentially a George Osborne speech. It's not change. It's 14 years. It's extraordinary, the economic consensus established under the coalition government and then David Cameron's Tory party, the way that it's continued through. I don't necessarily think I would have expected a Labour government to adhere to the same economic thinking that they've apparently spent the last 14 years bemoaning.
If Keir Starmer was sitting here right now, he might say, but look at the public sector pay rises we have just given above inflation in order to make sure we retain those staff and end the strikes.
Yeah, it's really peculiar.
That is a change.
Yeah, no, absolutely is. And the kind of the gap between the rhetoric and the actual action of the Labour government I find quite interesting. So when those pay rises came into force, it was the same day that Reeves gave that speech in the Commons before the recess. And
29th of July.
And what was the language she was employing, right? It's tough decisions, household budget. She barely mentioned the public sector pay rises. And I find it quite peculiar that on the one hand, whilst they're doing this actually relatively progressive thing, and by the way, I reject the politics that says you have to choose between the pensioners and the workers and the public sector pay rises. I don't believe in playing voters or parts of the electorate off each other in that way. But it's really interesting, the sort of their action and the difference between what they're saying when they're speaking publicly. And I don't know where that comes from, whether it's media management, whether it's just a rhetorical game. It's quite interesting.
We should really trail the PoliticsJOE podcast as we beat Newsnight to the punch.
Oh, we got the exclusive on Ollie Dugmore.
Yeah.
Good.
That's like, you know, when like football clubs.
Hey, you made the point you made on Newsnight on here as well. So we got the exclusive on you as well.
Yeah. It's like when football clubs do interviews with their own players as like an exclusive, and you're like, ooh, how'd you get that? How did you land that? Exclusive sit down with your new signing.
Well, do you know, like the other day when like Jermaine Genius was in the news?
Yes.
And there was like a BBC correspondent standing outside the BBC. He said, "We've reached out to the BBC for comment."
Do you know what they should do? Do you know what they should do? Remember when the GB News guy went into Greenpeace?
You think that the BBC should doorstep the BBC?
Show. You're like, what is it? It must be like a few floors apart.
Well, no, hilariously, where he was standing, the one show would have actually been to his left. It's right there.
So the team that he was looking for an answer for, he could have followed them around.
Well, it's actually
the BBC
there's a
building.
big window, so he could have actually just gone and knocked on the window.
Excuse me, I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I think people would have enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Right, remember when Darren Jones was in Cross Question and he said he didn't know what it wouldn't be the economic policy.
I don't know anything.
It wouldn't have been that.
He was asked a specific question, wasn't he?
It was about something that wasn't in his policy brief. So he was like, I don't know.
I can find out for you.
And then whoever it was texted in saying, our policy is this. People quite like when you break the format.
I think he should have gone up to the window. His report should have been, I've peered in the one show's window. Jermaine does not appear to be in there.
They should have done, you know, like when TV journalists go and say, we've been trying to track down the rogue CEO. We've been to his house. There's them like peering through the window. It's like Jermaine Genius's dressing room. Standing in his car park space.
Yeah.
Like, we've been looking everywhere for them.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be good. Well, where they could have found him was in the TalkSport studio.
Yes.
Because while that was all unfolding, he was actually still on air until 7 o'clock.
So any of the other outlets in the News UK building could have been banging on the window.
Well, if you remember, the exclusive was broken in the Sun.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a couple floors below the TalkSport studio.
That could have been an awkward lift journey for the reporter on the way out.
Because it was like it started out that it was like Jermaine Genius has refused comment, or has declined our request for comment. Could have gone up a couple of stairs.
Maybe they did. Maybe someone. Sorry, the Sun are here.
Yeah.
Hi,
Jermaine.
it's me, Sun reporter.
I know that you're trying to do your show here.
Quick comment.
But if you notice, you can't, you can't take any texts or calls right now. It's because of us.
Yep.
Could you? He couldn't take any texts or calls.
Could you not?
I do have it on good authority that he
Gosh.
could see the message box.
Wow.
The message box was not.
He was choosing to
It's not
ignore it.
particularly kind that
No.
day.
What would you do if I made a full, in-depth piece about you?
What would you do?
I don't know. Just
Go on.
Well, it's a hypothetical. You've not done anything to report on.
Thank you.
But imagine that you
So
could.
quite a backhanded insult, isn't it?
It wasn't an insult.
You've done nothing of note.
Nothing. Okay, sorry. You murder puppies in your spare time.
Right, so I don't, do I?
That's the fucking point.
Okay.
It's a complete.
What point is it that you're making?
What would imagine? Like, I always think it's funny the idea of. So, like, say Laura and I have been working for like a 4-month-long investigation into you. It's like we sit next to each other. Laura sits across from me, turning our laptops away from us, so you can't see me editing like a zoomed-in picture, like a photo. We've gone somewhere, taken a photo of you coming out of your house. I'm knocking on the door performatively. He was not here. What would
Do you know where I live?
No, I
You don't.
No, I don't.
Laura and Sean do.
Do they?
Yeah, they do.
Why?
They've been there a couple of times.
It's quite rude.
Not socially, just like...
No, I wouldn't try. It would not be social.
They were doing this big exclusive. No, they came around like when I've rented a car because we've had to go long distance somewhere.
On holiday,
Yeah, on holiday.
but a business holiday.
If we go on a work trip and I have to go and pick up the car, I make the meeting spot my flat.
That's what Ollie did to me once.
No, but that's very different. I live next to like a very big, easy to get to station, right? Ollie doesn't.
No, it was when.
No, even then he wouldn't have done.
No, but where were we going? We were going somewhere in Kent. It was the night the pubs opened, post lockdown 3, and we were making a video that was like, this pub was, you could buy a pint at midnight. It was in like Bexley or something, and he was like, "Oh, we need."
So like just at the bottom, southeast London.
Yeah, but we need to meet at Nunhead Station. I did not live anywhere near Nunhead Station.
But you could have met him at London Bridge because that would have.
Yeah, could have done.
Yeah.
But he was insistent.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
He just wanted to see you. That's really sweet.
He wanted to see me at midnight on a Sunday.
Yeah. No, they've been writing, and my mum's made Laura a coffee before.
Really?
I don't know why my mum was there. She
Yeah,
was just there.
That's nice.
I actually can't remember why she was there. Did I leave her in the flat? You've been out the night before with her. And she stayed over. It's mental.
That's quite sweet.
Yeah. I don't know why she would have stayed over.
No.
Clingy.
Yeah, very clingy.
She doesn't like being in her house alone when my dad's away.
That's fair.
Well, she's scared of the ghosts.
Is there a ghost in your house?
Yeah.
Right.
There are.
Which ghost?
Well, I don't know, but I call one of them Steve because that's how we differentiate between. There's the children who play by the front door.
Right, that's awful.
And then and then there's Steve in the kitchen. I don't know what his name is upstairs, but he's horrible as well.
How many children are there?
3 or 4.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you know about the ghosts?
Because I see them.
Okay. You've got quite like a good series interview, like for the second half of this episode. We're gonna have to. That is a long time down the track, guys. What do you mean you've seen the ghosts? Which ghosts?
I told you the children that play
Okay, no.
by the door.
What do they look like?
Well, the one who lives, the guy who's in the kitchen.
Are they squatters?
The guy in the kitchen is so serious that the first time that I saw him, I was out the back, and my parents were asleep, and I rang him, and I was like, my dad, and I was like, you need
the ghost.
I said, you've got to call the police. There's someone in the kitchen. I was like losing my mind, and then there wasn't anyone in the kitchen.
Right. How old were you?
Oh, it's like a couple of years ago.
Wait, so their ghosts have just arrived?
Yeah.
So they haven't always lived there? Or they
Well, I haven't always lived there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Have your parents seen the ghost?
My dad's seen the children at the door, the front door.
Okay.
He doesn't mind though. He doesn't care.
He doesn't care?
No.
Does your mum care?
Yeah, that's where we started from. That's why she stays at
Yes,
mine.
of course. Are the ghosts disruptive in any way?
There was one time that I don't even want to tell you this because I know that you're receiving me in bad faith.
I'm curious.
There was one time when I used to stay in. There's like 2 other bedrooms, right? Mm-hmm. And I used to stay in this particular bedroom, and a whole shelf like of books fell onto my head, but it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense because the shelf wasn't above the bed.
Oh, what the fuck?
Yeah. So for a long time, my sister was at uni, and I'd come stayed at my parents' house, and for a long time I was convinced it was my dad who did it.
That's a prank.
Yeah. Or did it in his sleep or something.
Do you know the podcast Otherworld?
No, should I go on it?
No, you should actually. It's like This American Life, but about like paranormal stuff.
Anyway, so I sleep in the other room now.
That makes sense. No, but I'm as in it's a good point. It's like interesting because I would describe myself as a cynic.
Yeah?
As of this, I've never had any
Strange, you've been so receptive.
any encounters with the paranormal. But there's like a story about like a guy who said he was like possessed by a djinn for a bit. And that was terrifying. And he seemed like
he
quite
was
credible.
possessed by a djinn?
Yeah, they're like
Like a drink?
no, like it's like a genie.
Oh, okay.
But it's like seemingly you're not even supposed to mention them. They're like just these massively evil spirits. And he kind of did it in jest, and then like one day his girlfriend looked at him, and his eyes were black, and so he had to kind of do some
I don't know about that.
magic to get rid of it.
I'm not sure about that.
It's a good podcast. I'd recommend.
I'll listen to the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think there are any ghosts in Germany? Yeah, I think there probably is. It's a haunted country.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Done some bad stuff.
That's coming out.
What? No, it's not. They have done some bad stuff.
We'll have to get a right to reply from Germany.
Do we know any Germans to ask quickly?
Do we work with any Germans? I don't know if we do.
No. No, we don't. I don't think I know very many Germans.
I saw someone who'd been on this podcast when I was at Fringe, and I always assumed that he was German, and he's not.
Who the hell are you talking about?
That's all.
So it's someone of dubious nationality who's been on this
That's all
podcast.
I have to say about that.
I don't even know who that is.
Well.
Well.
I don't know why I'm going to whisper this, but I am. I thought, like it's an insult.
For the listener, Ava's now writing on her notepad something which I assume is going to be the name of somebody.
I thought that he was German.
What? Why?
You know, he's just blonde.
I get that from his name. He's got an unusual name.
Yeah, it's not his name.
What?
Found that out this week, like last weekend as well.
That's interesting.
Yeah, anyway.
Is it like a stage name?
Should we move on because it's of no interest to anyone
No,
else?
absolutely not. Speaking of Germans and the Reformation.
Oh, because Starmer's meeting Olaf.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. What the bloody hell's going on there?
What the bloody hell is going on
What
there?
the bloody hell's going on there?
I don't think that's as interesting as the conversation that I had with Richard Murphy.
No, probably not.
You want to go through Olaf though?
It's interesting that people were suggesting that there was going to be freedom of movement returned to under 30s.
It's going to be agonising to be not in that cohort.
I just remembered that. That is tough. Are you going to be one of the people suing?
But I don't understand, like, what everything shit has happened to, like, my age group.
Stuff like, yeah.
Do you know what really made me laugh the other week?
What?
You know that Harry Potter, like, finger puppet show that went viral, like one of the first, like, viral videos?
Oh, yeah. Potter Puppet Pals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw this tweet that was like, you dancing to this on your dial-up computer while your parents are crying downstairs. It's like, it's so accurate.
You remember when you used to, like, I was thinking about how, like, YouTube has changed, and I was like, there used to be a video you used to watch all the time.
Oh, sorry, because of the recession. I should just contextualise that.
Oh, I think you meant because they were getting divorced or
No,
something.
Right. They
Right.
were crying downstairs because of the recession.
Right.
And then you were up, because it came out in 2008, and
Yeah.
then you were upstairs being like,
Snape. And I don't even know if you'd be able to find this on YouTube now. But a video I used to watch all the time, and it was called like Texas Chainsaw Massacre Prank, And it was just like a home video of like these parents had found out their teenage children had watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre and were like sleeping in one bed with the lights on because they were all so scared.
No
and
way.
the dad had put on a mask.
No.
I was like, remember. I just watch it and howl with laughter.
That's really
and I just
funny.
think that's just not how people use YouTube anymore. And also, I think if you search for that, there'd be so many shit prank, like actual like prank YouTuber, like Sam Pepper.
I pranked my girlfriend, and
Yeah.
it'll be like that funny. Some of the pranks I've watched,
Oh,
not funny. Like for some reason, I get loads of like boyfriends pranking their girlfriends into thinking that they're about to propose. I don't know why
What the fuck?
I don't know why that's something the algorithm like is like. She wants this, and yeah, I find it's always really traumatic.
did you ever watch Prank Wars on College Humor?
No.
It was this like massively viral series of like two colleagues kept pranking each other over. I think it was like 8 or 9 episodes, and it went from being like one of them did a stand-up set and the audience was primed not to laugh at all, to like one of them did a skydive, and the instructor was like, "Oh, the parachute's broken" or something like that. So that's what the scale it went to. Went massively viral. They were on like maybe it was Jimmy Fallon or something, and then they got like a MTV clip show as a result, and the whole thing was scripted, and like only like 3 people knew, and people kept like it was a really big deal. So there's a lot of like ad money tied up in it as well. So it was a high risk game with that. Should we start making prank videos?
Did someone did someone get hurt?
No. But as in, like the whole thing was fake.
Oh, okay. Have you seen that video of Paris Hilton when she's on that plane, and they prank
is
her
that-
into thinking it's going to crash?
Was that like a Norwegian prank show or something like that?
I can't remember what prank show it was, but it was absolutely insane. They pranked and they actually simulated as if the plane was crashing. Like the plane nosedived.
What the fuck?
That is an
Holy
insane
shit.
thing to do.
Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah. And then they're like, there's like canned laughter in the background while like Paris is screaming and crying.
Not actually that funny.
No,
Not actually that funny.
not at all.
Well, good news for you
Yeah,
and the over 30s. Starmer's ruled out a return to freedom. of
I'm not
movement.
over 30.
What are you then?
30.
You're 30 plus X amount of days.
You're basically there.
You're nearly 31.
You're edging 30.
I'm edging 30.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a couple of years in between.
Yeah, edging it.
Creeping up to.
Is that what
Keeping
is
keeping
that-
a healthy distance.
Oh, isn't your girlfriend lucky? Not edging, just creeping up to you. Creeping up to it.
What do you think? Do you like Germany?
Do I like Jeremy?
Germany.
Do I like Germany?
Yeah.
I can't not tell this story now about how my friend is going out with this guy who's a civil servant, and she thought that part of his role would see him move to Berlin. That was what was discussed. It's now looking like it's going to be Saudi Arabia.
So different.
Very funny.
Such a different prospect.
Very different.
You can move to the more dangerous jobs in the civil service. I don't think Saudi Arabia would necessarily be one of them. But like the ones that kind of like suck. Like you live in Afghanistan for
They
a year.
want to do that though. That's why they're a civil servant in the Foreign Office.
No, but you get a ton of money as well. But then also you might want to just do like Washington or Tokyo or something like that.
I knew a girl who was like, she used to say she was a diplomat, but I don't really know how that worked. Anyway, she worked for the Foreign Office, and she was in India, and they had a sweet deal. Mm-hmm. Sweet. I knew her. Wasn't friends with her. And then she had like 3 kids, and she could fly back and forward from the UK whenever she wanted to.
Wow.
They paid for it. Yeah.
And the cost of living would be pretty incredible.
Well, she lives in a compound
Wow.
that was paid for, and the kids all got paid schooling.
Why do we do this?
I think about that all the time.
I know so many friends from uni who are like, ugh, anyway, that's not a public conversation.
Yeah, it gets quite difficult. Yeah, I've noticed that because I've been going to a few weddings recently, and I think, oh, this is what accountancy gets you.
I'm good at maths.
Yeah.
How hard could it be?
Going around to people's dinner parties, I'm like, oh shit,
Yeah.
should have got a job in government. Should have worked in the city.
It's not too late for that.
I don't think I could work in the city.
Why?
I'm not very good at getting in lifts.
There's more to it than that. You could work from home. You could get one of those big terminals.
I don't think I could get in a lift a couple of times a day. I got stuck in a lift when I was on holiday. Can you believe that? I hadn't been in a lift in about a year.
Do you not get in the lift?
I don't get on the tube, you know this.
Yeah, but I thought it was like a hygiene thing rather than like a...
You thought that was a hygiene thing?
Yeah.
No.
No, it's cause...
No, it's not a hygiene thing. I'm filthy.
Is it claustrophobia?
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah. And I have to be quite tipsy before I get on the plane.
Oh, I'm not a good flyer either.
But it's only the claustrophobia bit. It's only when they shut the door. That's the
Yeah.
bit I don't like. I don't like when they shut the door.
Would you get on a boat?
No, because I feel like I could get off the boat.
Depends where.
Or I could be out in the open.
Yeah.
I couldn't get in a submarine, but I think that was probably already...
It's also quite unlikely you'd have to get a submarine.
Did you see that TikTok of that girl who was like, the ocean keeps like sacrificing billionaires? We keep sacrificing billionaires to the ocean.
Yeah.
It was like Mother Ocean. She's hungry.
Yeah, if you're a billionaire, don't go in the sea.
Don't, yeah.
They love yachts.
The sea.
Yeah. No, billionaires. I don't know if the sea loves you. Presumably the sea loves yachts.
The first one was a submarine, if you remember.
True, but they don't all go in that. That was like that's an unusual
Yeah.
thing to do, to get in a it was actually a submersible. I don't really know what the difference is, but people were insistent on it.
Would you say you were a submersible?
What was this, women or boats? Oh, was it women are boats and men are speedboats? If you're a new listener, but I can't imagine we have any, that was from a conversation we had where I insisted that women are boats because they have breasts.
And you even followed it up with a text to Nigel Farage to make sure you were right.
No, that was if he knew that he was Sydney Sweeney. If he knew who Sydney Sweeney was.
And is she a boat?
I guess.
It's awful.
How do we tee up your interview?
I don't know, but we can't tell him that it's really going to be in this podcast. What if he listens to it?
with his family being like, great news.
Yeah.
I was on a podcast. Yeah, that's going to be troubling for it. Well, it's too late now. It's going to be here.
We're in kind of like a sweet spot at the moment where I feel like a lot of establishment people don't know about the podcast.
You know, I was in a meeting today. And I was like, ooh. Yep, never listened to this.
Yeah.
Never listened to our conversation about squirting yesterday.
No, nothing makes me more relieved than when people say to me, I watch you on YouTube, but I haven't had time for the podcast. I'm like, absolutely fine. Watch it there.
Yep.
Just the long form documentaries.
It's a secret between them and us. Thankfully, none of them are influential people.
Yeah.
Thank God.
I wish that we'd saved everything that we've cut out of here because we haven't cut out very much over the past year.
No, but there's one
But
episode.
what we have cut out.
There's one episode where we had to cut out something you were doing.
What was I doing?
I'll tell you. I will tell you.
No,
afterwards.
tell me now.
No, I'm going to tell you now.
Tell me now. You can beep it out.
No, don't run that risk.
I know. I want to know. Tell me.
I'll tell you.
I
after
need to know.
No.
What was it?
It was bad.
What was it?
No, it was bad about me. You were making a joke about me that was like, I can't possibly have that in.
Oh, okay.
And then...
Oh, I don't care if it's about you.
Then I had to really fight for it to be taken out.
Is that why you can't run the risk again?
And then also as well, it was only like people only acquiesced to it being taken out. And I pointed out it could have conflicted commercially with the company. Not just that it was like a horrendously poor taste joke. And seeing, like, you know what jokes we keep in? This was when we had to, like, absolutely draw the line.
Well, I wouldn't have taken it out.
No, true.
It could have damaged the company commercially.
I like having a job.
We can't get those BP ads off. Like,
Yep, they're a choice.
like, we can't get them off.
Who were you interviewing today?
Oh, I was talking to economist and professor Richard J. Murphy.
Excellent.
If you want to find him on socials. He was really interesting, actually. He was talking about what Starmer said yesterday during his speech about this painful autumn budget that we're going to have in October. And I asked him about austerity and if I thought that this was austerity 2.0. Mm-hmm. And he sort of looked at me as if to say, you fool.
Oh.
Of course it is. It was really interesting. So and you're going to hear it in a minute, the bit I found interesting was his criticism of Rachel Reeves and her position as Chancellor. So he compared her to Philip Snowden, who was the Labour Chancellor who introduced austerity. And he said that she was very much of the tightening the public purse, and he doesn't quite understand how she's convinced the rest of Cabinet to go along with it. It's very interesting.
That is interesting. I'm looking forward to listening to it. So shall we roll that now?
Here it is.
Enjoy.
I'm Richard Murphy. I am Professor of Accounting Practice at Sheffield University Management School and a political economist.
So can you talk to me about Starmer's speech yesterday? We were told that we're going to have a very painful autumn budget this October. What were your first impressions?
I listened to and then read Starmer's speech to make sure I got it right, because the first reaction was, it can't be that bad. And the second reaction was, yes, it is. What is he saying? He's saying basically that the Tories left the whole country in a mess and there's nothing he can do about it, as if he has no choices left available, because the Treasury won't let him spend any money. And all of this is going to lead to, as he put it, pain on the behalf of all of us who are living in the UK. And there is no reason for any of that, is my reaction. So my sentiment on listening to this was, this is a man who, first of all, breaks the mold of all previous Labour prime ministers, because he comes in without hope. And that surely is the definition of what a Labour prime minister should be. And secondly, he comes in accepting that there is effectively nothing that he can do, because Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak have apparently stitched him up, and therefore his ability to govern does not exist. Why did we bother electing him, is my question.
Is that any different to the line that he gave us during the election? I know that he hammered home this idea of change, but he did warn the public that it would be very difficult, in his first 100 days.
Well, he says this is different, and I'm going to, in a sense, accept his word for that. Now, that might, of course, be naive of me, but he claims that they did not know there was a £22 billion, as he calls it, black hole in the government's finances at the time that they took over. Although everybody who I know who commented on the budget in March suggested that a figure of around that scale did exist, and you only had to read the OBR report at the time to believe that the figures which are being published by them on behalf of Jeremy Hunt did not add up. It was glaringly obvious they couldn't. He was forecasting a 1% increase in spending on departments, or for government departments. That wasn't clearly going to happen. It was obvious that there was going to need to be more spending than that. And therefore, I think that he should have known that there was a deficit. But he claims that this is news to them, and he claims it is news to the OBR. Well, that's, again, disingenuous of him. That's the best I will say of what he has represented about the OBR. Why is it disingenuous? Because the OBR is only allowed to use the figures it's given. The OBR does not actually create the figures. It comments upon what the Treasury gives it. So it said in March that it didn't think the figures were credible. It didn't, and was not asked to say at the time that there was a deficit which was unfunded, because that is beyond its remit. So to now claim that they've discovered something since then which they didn't know about is pretty fanciful on his part. But he nonetheless claims that this reframes how he and Rachel Reeves are looking at the role of government over the next few years, because they haven't got the money left. I don't believe them. There is clearly money available, but they say that they haven't got it, and that's what matters, because after all, they are ultimately the people who write the checks.
Well, also, when we talk about not having the money available, I mean, I suppose you could argue that there is always a political choice with what money is available, how that is spent. And, you know, a couple of the announcements that we've heard already, we know that there are going to be above inflation public sector pay rises. Is that a good way to be spending the quote unquote limited money that apparently is in the pot?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would totally support above inflation public sector pay rises. Why? Because public sector employees have had below inflation pay rises for a long time. If we look at the junior doctors, it was genuinely true that their pay had, since 2010, fallen dramatically compared to what it was at that time. There were junior doctors earning £15 an hour, which is only a bit above minimum wage, which was ridiculous given the antisocial hours that many of them are expected to work, including weekends. So the minimum wage is not set taking those factors into account. And frankly, there was almost any job that you like to think of where a junior doctor could make more money than they could by working a night shift to look after people who needed care. So to suggest that it was a mistake to pay them a pay rise is absurd. I don't call train drivers at present public sector employees because it's still ambiguous who precisely controls the franchises which pay them. But the point is that the train drivers dispute had to be resolved, and there were clear issues that did require resolution. And in the future, there are major problems which require public sector pay to go up, because the basic fact is that recruitment and retention in very many public sector jobs is incredibly difficult. I know a lot of teachers. I know a lot of university teachers as well, given my own job. And it is very difficult to keep people doing what are actually, despite the rumours that are put around by the free market think tanks, quite difficult jobs for relatively low pay when there are other options available. I mean, I have a friend who's a teacher who's gone off to become a recruitment consultant. I'm not sure what benefit he's adding to society by being a recruitment consultant, but he could no longer make ends meet and face the demands being put upon him as a primary school teacher. And that was his personal choice as to how to manage that. Now, if that's the case, you've got to put up pay to compensate people to stay in what are difficult jobs. And I personally would not want to stand in front of up to 39-year-olds for many hours a day, many weeks in a row, as primary school teachers are required to do. I have met plenty of 9-year-olds in my time, including my own. And the idea of standing in front of them all day would not appeal to me. So en masse, and we've got to be realistic about this. If we ask people to do difficult jobs, then we should pay them for them. And if we don't, we won't have public services. So Labour has, in the sense that it said it's going to do these things, done the right thing. But let's add the caveat now. There's been an attachment, which is you can have the pay rise, but effectively your school is now underfunded because it's got to make cuts elsewhere. Most schools can't make cuts elsewhere if they give their teachers pay rises. All they can do is cut out support work, which means that children with special educational needs don't get the support that they require, which is absurd. I mean, I'm a former chair of governors of primary schools. Let me put that experience on the table. For many years in central London, I know that children won't get the support they need with English as a second language, because that won't be on the table either. There will be all sorts of needs unmet as a consequence of doing this. We will have the childcare facility of primary school in place, which is what I think most politicians think it's all about, because that enables people to go to work, which we know is Keir Starmer's obsession, maximising the number of people in the workplace. It's also Wes Streeting's obsession with healthcare. But that isn't what education is about. Believe it or not, it's actually about training young people to be useful members of society. But they rather forget that bit. And they always assume that everyone is normal. I don't know many normal people. I know people who are on a range from pretty abnormal in some directions to pretty abnormal in other directions, and I fit somewhere within that scope, and we all do. But they assume that there's this little thing that we can put in a hole and teach a standard curriculum. Wrong. And they are making that assumption when offering these pay rises. So from the outset, Labour is making some very big assumptions which aren't terribly clear as yet, which are going to make the provision of public services very hard, even if they do give the necessary pay rises.
And even if they do give those necessary pay rises, you've still got the issue of, as you've already said, underfunded, facilities, underfunded institutions. So is there an argument that it's almost counterproductive, particularly when there's a lot of emphasis from Labour on retention and improving retention rates across the NHS, across teaching staff, that, well, one of the big issues that those public sector workers face is that they physically can't do the job in a lot of cases, and they feel quite drilled down because their institutions are falling apart around them. So even if they give the pay rises, is it counterproductive to not fix, say, the facilities?
Well, I had an image come to mind, which is of a hospital about 30 miles from where I happen to be sitting at the moment, which is King's Lynn Hospital, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in King's Lynn in Norfolk, which was just above Liz Truss's old constituency. That hospital is held up by 1,500 poles at the moment because the roof is literally falling down and they don't know where it's going to fall down next. So they have these scaffolding poles to hold the roof up internally. Now, who wants to work in a place which is held up by scaffolding poles? Because the next time you're doing an operation, it might be your operating theatre where the ceiling falls down. That is pretty demotivational. I would never have provided that facility in the private sector and expected somebody to come to work. Why do it in the state sector? And the reality is that putting these things right would actually provide the growth that Keir Starmer says is his obsession. Because what we need to do is put people to work doing activities which are of social benefit for the people of this country to deliver what people need. And it's my belief that now most people do not want to have another iPhone or another iPad or whatever else, but actually are really very desperate for there to be better education, better healthcare, and so on, because they know the cost of the alternative is incredibly high. They also know, in many cases, that the cost of underfunding is that they themselves are brought into direct hardship. For example, I recently became an old age pensioner, much to my own surprise, but as a result, well, how did that happen? I keep on asking myself, where did I make it to 66? But I know a lot of people as a result who spent a lot of time in their sort of last decade or so, my friendship with them, looking after very aged parents because social care has no facility for people of their parents' age. And that is a cause of massive underproduction in the economy. It's a completely false economy not to provide care for elderly people who could otherwise live at home, but who then demand that a child is around, child in their 50s or 60s still, and I have friends who still have parents alive in their 60s, because there's a risk they might just fall over. But they wouldn't if they were in a daycare centre where they could be looked after and could still be looked after at night somewhere else. So we just get such a failure to look at this. And Wes Streeting appears to have no comprehension that if he doesn't spend money on infrastructure and social care, he will never solve the problems of the NHS. Of course, he also has no comprehension of the fact that if he doesn't spend money cutting the amount of sugar in ultra-processed foods, he also won't get rid of diabetes and obesity and even dementia itself, which is now described as diabetes type 3. There's a failure to integrate all this thinking inside Labour. In fact, the shocking thing about Labour is that they appear to have done no preparation for government, that they've arrived in office and apparently they didn't know there was a deficit. Apparently they don't know why healthcare demands exist. Apparently they don't know the connections between the health service and social care. Apparently they don't know that they've actually got a backlog of repairs, which is as long as your arm, and that they need to fund that to make sure things are done right. They don't know any of this stuff. And you think, what did they do in 14 years of opposition? And I wish I knew the answer to that question because I genuinely don't.
When you talk about ramifications of certain policies not being implemented, what do you think taking away the winter fuel allowance from certain people, well, anyone who is not in receipt of pension credit or other benefits, what ramifications will that have on the public sector?
Of all the things that I could have imagined Labour doing, first of all, taking away the winter fuel allowance was probably the last on my list. It just would never have occurred to me to even think about that as a possibility. Now, there are people who are old age pensioners who can definitely do without an additional £300 tax-free a year. And hands up, I am, I guess, one of those. I'm still in employment. I'm fit. I'm well. I'm able to heat my house. I'm incredibly fortunate. I'm lucky. I know it. But the cost of actually putting in place a benefits checking system to eliminate people like me would have been very high. And the consequences that they've chosen are very bad, if you like, a precipice benefit to actually ensure that people cannot get access to this. Pension credit is a very difficult credit to claim in the first place. It's very complicated to go through the process. It requires you to be online, and lots of pensioners aren't. And the forms are exceptionally complicated. And if you are 5p over the earnings limit, you lose that pension credit and therefore the entitlement to winter fuel allowance, which is why I call it a precipice benefit. It's either you're in or you're out. And once you're out, you're incredibly out. And therefore, lots of people are being punished. We know that at least 1/3 of all people who should get pension credit aren't getting it. And I would suggest that data exclusion is one of the reasons for that, because it is so hard to actually make the application. But also, it's a complicated process, even if you get online. But this just feels like punishment for those who are vulnerable. And I keep on hearing this phrase that Keir Starmer talks about. She said, it's always for working families. Well, that's fine, Keir, but I know quite a lot of people who live by themselves. Are they families by your definition, or do they not count? And I know quite a lot of people who don't work. I spent the weekend meeting old friends for a party, and a fair number of the people who were there were under the age of 18. They did not work. Do they count in your society, Keir? There were friends of mine who were my age who are now retired. Do they no longer count in your society? One of the people there has had ever since birth a significant difficulty with her cognition. She's able to function, but she can't work, and she's now in her 30s. Does she not count, Keir? I have this real problem with his definitions of who's on the outside and who's on the inside. And because every single comment is aimed at hard-working families, apparently if you work, you're hard-working. I don't know why he assumes that's the case, because I also know some people who earn a great deal of money who don't seem very hard-working for it. But let's leave that comment aside. The point is that this is a false presentation that he's making. Everything's binary in Keir Starmer's world. You're either a goodie or you're a baddie. You're a baddie if you don't work. You're a goodie if you do work. No, that's just not the way the world is, Keir. Actually, we live in a world of greyness. I mentioned earlier when we were talking about normal people. There are no normal people. If you're in government, you have to actually manage all types of people. And all types of people include those who are not working. And to pick on them, whether they be children in poverty because of the 2-child benefit cap or because they're old, seems to me to be just about the worst thing that a Labour government could do.
Do you not buy that that might be a technicality, that working people, phrase that they keep bandying about? I mean, perhaps that is an introduction or a way that they can increase capital gains tax, or they can eliminate the carried interest on private equity. Does that working people perhaps mean that, get them out of, allow them to raise those taxes? Is it necessarily within? I'm not sure I'm not sure about your definition. I mean, I understand.
Well, working people, I am presuming that I will take working people in its sort of common understanding. People who go out to work, whether that be employed or self-employed. Curiously, the self-employed will pay capital gains tax because they will probably sell a business at some time. And therefore, they actually will pay tax. So his hardworking family is actually very typically, if you find somebody who does pay capital gains tax, quite probably from a hardworking family. So he fails to differentiate there. And the person who's got a carried interest is actually working in a private equity fund. It may not be quite the way that most of us will recognize work, but they are actually working. They just happen to be remunerated in a very strange way in a very low tax manner. But nonetheless, by his definition of hardworking, they probably are. They probably put in very many hours to actually earn several million a year on which they don't want to pay a lot of tax. So I don't think that we can say that he's doing that to try to provide a differentiation. The differentiation that we need is to differentiate between income from work and income derived from wealth. And that is income or gains derived from wealth. I'm personally not a great fan of wealth taxes per se, simply because I think, as somebody who has 40 years of experience of actually looking at the tax system from inside, I have, alongside my academic career, my campaigning career, also been a practicing chartered accountant for a long time. I am no longer, but I was for 40 years. And I think a wealth tax would be a nightmare to administer and collect for relatively low reward. But there are a great many ways in which, if he really does insist we do need new taxes, and I think it would be easier to borrow more, by the way, but if he does insist we need new taxes to fill the black hole that he claims the Tories have created, which prevent him delivering services that we require, then he could very simply equalise capital gains tax and income tax rates and make 14 billion a year. He could charge VAT on the supply of financial services by banks and other people, and that would raise £8 billion a year. Add those two together, and I just found the 22 billion he needs. It is as simple as that. That could be done like that overnight without any stress, just a line in a finance bill. Solved, Keir. Your tough decisions are over. Now get on with the job of deciding what you're going to do next for the benefit of people in this country.
And would that meet the definition of those with the broadest shoulders carrying the heavier burden?
Yeah, because let's be clear, nobody makes a capital gain unless they have significant wealth. You've got to make a gain of over 12,500 a year. The number of people who, in my experience, that I saw as a practicing accountant who made capital gains is pretty small. It's a few 100,000 at most in the whole economy a year. And they are inevitably in the wealthiest 1 or 2% of people in the economy as a whole. So they definitely have the broadest shoulders. And when we're talking about VAT on financial services, nobody buys financial services unless they're wealthy enough to have to worry about what to do with their money. In other words, they must, by definition, have the broadest capacity and broadest shoulders to bear the burden of extra tax. So these are straightforward taxes on wealth or income derived from wealth, and therefore they're easily within his definition of broadest shoulders, yes.
This budget that we're expecting in October, do you think it will meet the definition of austerity?
Yes. Do I think this budget will meet the definition of austerity? Yes, I do. What is austerity? It is a budget which is going to provide for a reduction in the required level of government spending that meets the needs of the population as it grows and as their needs grow and develop. We are not going to see the government matching those needs. It will underfund the necessary services. I'm not talking about silly services that we would all like. I mean, everybody would love a free holiday in Barbados a year, or courtesy of the government. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about actually doing some very basic things, like making sure that people who've got cancer are seen within a couple of weeks of their diagnosis. We're talking about people who've had a heart attack actually being seen by a heart specialist, not 12 hours after they arrive in A&E, but very quickly, because that massively improves their life chances. We're talking about children with special needs getting the care and support that they require. If those things are not happening, we are going to be living in austerity. We are going to be suffering a government that is deliberately imposing hardship on the population. And that, in my definition, is austerity.
It's very confusing, though, because what you've just laid out was arguably what was sold to the electorate just a couple of weeks ago. I mean, everything you've just said about prevention, that is something that Wes Streeting has been talking about for quite some time. I mean, why are they not following through on it? Or are they just simply not able to follow through on the promises?
Well, first of all, we have to allow for the possibility they didn't tell us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth during the course of the election campaign, which has happened in the history of politics. I've got to be honest with you. I think I haven't seen enough. My first election campaign was in 1970, and I haven't seen one yet where everybody's told the whole truth. So Wes Streeting might not have told you everything you wanted to know. But secondly, I think that everybody underestimated the willpower of Rachel Reeves to impose her budget constraint on anybody who had a spending department. They all lived in hope, and so many commentators lived in hope. You wait, when they get into office, they will show you that they aren't New Labour 2. They are actually something really quite radical. Well, they're not New Labour 2. No, they're George Osborne 2 at best. And we are seeing that austerity really is the mantra they're going to offer, because Rachel Reeves is like... Rachel Reeves has been built in the mould of Philip Snowden. Now, most people don't know who Philip Snowden is. He became Viscount Snowden. He was, in fact, the first ever Labour Chancellor of the Exchequer, and he served several times in that role before becoming a member of the national government which basically sold Labour out in 1931. And he created the austerity that led to the massive recession of the 1930s, the Jarrow marches and everything else, because he believed he had to balance the books, even though we were facing an economic crisis. We do face an economic crisis now. The economic crisis is one of failing public services and our inability to deal with climate change. Those two things together amount to a crisis. If this was a war, they would find the money. If this was something else of a similar scale, like COVID, for example, they would find the money. They would create QE. Literally, before I began talking to you, I was talking to an economist who said, well, look, issue a government bond this week for £22 billion and have the Bank of England buy it back next week for £22 billion. Problem solved. Do QE if you don't want to do anything else. You could do that. There's ample capacity to sell a bond into the Bank of England because it has actually been flogging off government bonds willy-nilly for the last couple of years for no gain whatsoever except to suppress the interest. No, sorry, except to increase the interest rate and support that. So we could actually have the Bank of England support the government to deliver everything we want. Everything is possible, but Rachel Reeves is refusing it. And I think that most of us, because I didn't, I believed that Rachel Reeves was really meaning what she said, that she was going to be an ironclad chancellor with ironclad fiscal rules. I don't think most people did. I think they've been sold a pup by the Labour Party. I think that there's going to be an enormous buyer's regret very soon. I genuinely believe that we have been seriously misled, and the next 5 years are going to be pretty miserable because we're going to suffer sustained austerity, at least until Keir Starmer realises at some point, and it's going to be a year or two out yet, that his chance of being re-elected in 2029 is extremely low unless he sacks Rachel Reeves. And I would actually forecast, I think, a 2026 departure, probably late 2026 cabinet reshuffle. She'll be gone, we'll get somebody else. But who will it be? Darren Jones. He's not going to be much better, probably. Could be Torsten Bell. He, in principle, knows a bit more about this from his days at the Resolution Foundation, but is fairly neoliberal as well. I don't know who it'll be. There may be a chance at change of heart, but it isn't yet. And by then, the damage will have been done. Labour will be in deep trouble.
That was good. Yeah, what a fascinating insight.
Yeah.
And if you want more fascinating... And
Ed didn't listen to it, by the way. We've just done a hard cut there, and then he's just come back in to say it was interesting.
Yeah, peek behind the... the curtain. I have no idea whether or not that was interesting. I'm sure it was, because I trust you.
Me?
Yes.
You trust me?
If you want more excellent insights and some troubling ones too, go to the PoliticsJOE subreddit r/PoliticsJOE. Remember to review us on an audio platform. And
Ed Campbell will soon be on Cameo. So get your requests in now.
It's good. We were talking about in the office today about how embarrassing it would be to have a cameo, but then equally, if there is like market demand, how could you possibly say no to an extra £5 a month? Would you donate yours to charity?
I don't think why would anyone want me on Cameo?
I think they would.
I think there's another website they probably pay a bit more for.
Okay, no comments about that, please. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.